being a mastery rank 10 requirement for this isn't the biggest weird thing about it. It's the lower damage coming in at 80 heat, but the high crit chance at 35%, and it only costing 175 platinum. Usually weapons that cost less than 200 tend to be more mastery fodder level, but this is coming in cheap, and it has me wondering whether it's going to be any good or not. I'm crossing my fingers that it is though. I mentioned earlier that this thing has more crit chance than almost any other melee weapon. The best one that I could come across was the Techo at 30% crit chance. Yeah, this thing's 35. This thing is actually going to be a better crit weapon than I could possibly hope it could ever be. The only reason I really still use the Helio Core is because it's got a nice crit chance to it. Not an amazing one, but a nice one. This thing has more crit chance by a lot, and a much higher crit multiplier. Okay, it looks like it's going to do less damage, but this thing sets enemies on fire. The charge strike ignites an explosion which sets them on fire, which is the biggest thing about this. I think could be really good because it's one of those, it looks like a blade and whip. It is a blade and whip which has one stance to it, so you don't really have much choice of what you can actually put in this. You can put Defiled Snapdragon in, or yeah, that's pretty much it. I did spend a few days using this before making my mind up whether I was going to keep it equipped or not, simply because it's a fairly high crit based weapon, which meant build wise it's the typical crit build. True Steel, Body Count, Blood Rush, Organ Shatter. I did have Primed Pressure Point and Prime Fury on it, but I did throw Corrosive on using Voltic Strike and Virulent Scourge, just for the sake of having an element on this. You can take those off and put other things on. But compared to the Helio Core, it actually seemed to be a fairly decent weapon. The stance itself is still a pretty decent stance. It has way more range than most melee weapons have. Even on the ground pound, it is just insane. But that low status chance didn't really seem to bother me, because obviously if you want a status blade and whip, you can either go for the, I think it's the Lacera, but that is a 45% status weapon. The Myos is a 25% status weapon, does have a higher fire rate, attack speed even, but also does 80 damage, but that is physical damage, whereas this weapon has elemental weapon with crit chance. Even the Lacera, which seems to be the closest match to this, apart from the fact it has 40% more status than this does 80 damage, but it does 80 electrical damage, and it does attack way slower than the Myos does. So this thing, it does kind of fit in with the whole blade and whip style weapon. It's a crit based one, not a status based one. If you want a status based blade and whip, the Lacera seems to be probably the best with a 45% status chance, but the Myos is definitely just king when it comes to attack speed with a 1.08. The Jat Kusar here has a 0.833. It is really slow. Berserker was a mod I was tempted on using, but this weapon's whole feature of charge strikes ignite an explosion blast at range seems to be fairly low damaging, and I even went and did the alert after the dev stream yesterday, which is fairly a low level mission, and I just messed around with the charged part of this, and it seemed to, the blast works, it knocks them over, but unless you finish it with an actual melee attack, all it's going to really do is kind of knock them over, which was a bit of a shame. I was hoping it would do more damage, but then using it in other places, it was doing lots of crit damage. I mean, the best I saw out of this was, I think it was 104,000 red crit, which without using the crit buff from Harrow, actually turned out to be fairly impressive with still hitting those raid crits. Considering they moved the raid crits up, it's no longer, I think it was 100 or 120% onwards would get raid crits. It's now something like 200% crit chance will get a raid crit, so that was insanely high crit chance to be landing raid crits. It's a fun weapon. I think I'm gonna leave it equipped for a while to come, because I still haven't made my mind up. The Helio Core, to me, I'm used to the stance on that more than anything else, because I've had it equipped basically since it came out. So having a different style melee weapon that I'm going to leave equipped just simply because it has 35% crit rather than the Helio Core's 25 means it's going to be better for landing those crit hits, plus the 2.5 times multiplier on it is going to come in really useful. Even though it does a lot less damage than the Helio Core, the added crit chance and the added multiplier should make up for it in the long run. So despite the fact that this thing isn't really an insane amount to build or an insane amount to actually buy with platinum, it turns out it's a fairly decent weapon if you're looking for a crit based melee. If you're looking for a status based blade and whip, you're still looking at either the Lacera or the Myos. Now I know the Myos has 25%, but the Lacera has 45%. They all seem to do about 80 damage anyway, so I would say Lacera for status. This, definitely crit based. Anyway, we'll leave this off here for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch yous next time.